Hello, this is the weekly review for U.S. history from March 29th to April 13th. This is actually a multi-week review because many of the weeks leading up to vacation were shortened for various reasons. On Monday, March 29th, we began to discuss the Cold War and the nuclear arms race. We watched a video about the atomic bomb and its development by both the United States and the Soviet Union. And we talked about how the development of weapons and the mass production of weapons characterized the Cold War. We also finished up World War II by working on the formative and summative assessments. Later on, we talked about a guide for surviving nuclear war. We read a document and watched a video that discussed the strategies for surviving a nuclear war. And then we talked about the purpose of the directions given back in the 1950s. And we talked about whether or not the directions were actually helpful. Given our 21st century analysis, we determined that they were not. Later in the week, we did an in-class activity that asked students to list some of the pros and cons of nuclear weapons. Pros included things such as the defense of national borders, deterrence against war, and increased power status. And cons included things such as the high cost of maintenance, the threat to life on the planet, and the storage of waste. Then we talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Again, that was the event. The Rosenbergs were the people, nuclear power was the issue, and the Cuban Missile Crisis was the event. We read two different varying interpretations of the crisis. One questioned Kennedy's leadership and claimed that he was weak and conceded too much to the Soviets. The other claimed that his leadership in the midst of a crisis was strong and prevented a nuclear war that may have led to global disaster. Then we began our varying interpretations formative and summative work. Level 1 asked students to discuss one interpretation of people, issues, and events together, and then students were asked to describe the other interpretation independently. For Level 2, which went a little bit deeper, we discussed the interpretations of the Rosenbergs, and then students were asked to describe the other interpretations independently, and to explain the similarities and differences between each interpretation. We started to scratch the surface of the civil rights movement, which is the unit we'll be working on when we return from vacation. We watched an introductory video. We also worked on two writing prompts. One asked students to brainstorm people and events from the civil rights movement to sort of get a background onto how much you already knew about the civil rights movement. And the other writing prompt encouraged a discussion of the Black Lives Matter movement. The exercise was intended to allow students to understand the connection between contemporary events in the history that we are studying. We worked on effective communication throughout the 3 weeks prior to vacation. We reviewed exit ticket responses on Monday, April 12th, and then students filled out an exit ticket on Tuesday, the 13th. They reflected on how well they met that day's lesson, as well as how they succeeded in effectively communicating. What's going to be happening in the future? We will continue working on the civil rights movement. Our indicator will allow students to analyze and critique varying interpretations of historic people, issues, or events, and explain how evidence is used to support different interpretations, an indicator that you should be familiar with because we work on it every other unit. And we'll also be working on a new executive functioning skill, integrity. That's it for now. Take care.